eHealth Ventures is an early stage investment, and we invest, from day one, basically, from idea, in digital health. But we are more on the deep tech side of digital health. So digital health could be, wellness, phone apps, very easy stuff to develop. We choose to go to the medical devices area. So doing diagnostics, doing digital therapy, um, all the deep stuff that takes a lot of time to develop and it's under regulation. So most of it will be considered a medical device, even if it's just software. It still needs to go through FDA process in order to be able to go to market. So in our field, time to market is pretty long. It's not like you develop your MVP in 2 years and you can go to market. No. In 2 years, you start clinical trials in order to validate your product, and then in 4 to 5 years, you can go to market.
Talor Sax, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really excited to dive into your world, dive into the world of health tech and e-health ventures. Um, really curious to get your perspective on the landscape and the industry and where we're at, the incredible opportunities. You have lots of experience with various companies and you've seen a lot, you've done a lot. So I'm really curious to sort of do a deep dive into your mind over 20 short but meaningful minutes and tell your story.
All right. So thank you for having me. It's really exciting for me to do it. Um, I was born and raised in Israel in a small town named Ofakim that became famous recently with unfortunate reasons, as you can imagine. Um, I got into health tech by mistake. I had a startup back in 2001 that was dealing with the internet stuff, early days that collapsed with the dot-com crisis. Then I had to find a job, so I found a job for a company that developed services for healthcare providers in Israel, and then it all started. Um, and it really got bigger and bigger. And after a year or two, I left the company. I opened my own startup in health tech for the first time, ran it for 2 years. It was pretty successful. I was successful in everything except for one important factor, which is choosing the partner. Um, so we had to split. I came back to the same company I was working for, this time as a partner, and we started a new company that focused on the US market. So from 2007 to 12, I was working mostly in the US around healthcare, around healthcare, IT, but also devices, telemedicine, the early days, and so forth. In 2012, I decided that I want to cross the lines to become an investor. I took the first shot, failed, which was good, because again, I had to find a job, and I found a job working for a different company that was a global company that focused on Europe more than the US. So I got to learn that the world is not only the US. There is more to it. And in some cases, you can do excellent business in other markets of products you can't sell in the US. In 2015, I took another shot at establishing a VC fund. This time I went back to Maccabi Healthcare Services, that were my longtime client. And my partner, Steve Shapiro in the US, went to the Cleveland Clinic. And together we built the anchor for the fund, eHealth Ventures, as it is today.
So the transition from the entrepreneurial side to the investment side, what was the trigger for that for you?
Um, Working in the US, it was interesting times. We had this crisis, the financial crisis of 2008. I just finished my MBA that was focused on corporate finance. And I found myself giving a lot of advice to other Israeli startups who wants to go and start working in the US. And I realized I have a strong point, that I know the US market. I know I can speak both languages, the business language and the technical language. So I can make the right connections and help them. And pretty much it's attracted me more than having another startup. So this is why I made a change.
And if you had to map for me the different elements within health tech, and the opportunities, are what are some of the most pertinent problems that you're really excited about? So if you're looking at it now from a bird's eye view in your own perspective, what are the sort of the verticals or the areas which you are most attracted to or drawn to yourself?
hmm So Hills Ventures is an early stage investment, and we invest, from day one, basically from idea, in digital health. But we are more on the deep tech side of digital health. So digital health could be, wellness, phone apps, very easy stuff to develop. We choose to go to the medical devices area. So doing diagnostics, doing digital therapy, um, all the deep stuff that takes a lot of time to develop and it's under regulation. So most of it will be considered a medical device, even if it's just software. It still needs to go through FDA process in order to be able to go to market. So in our field, time to market is pretty long. It's not like you develop your MVP in 2 years and you can go to market. No. In 2 years, you start clinical trials in order to validate your product, and then in 4 to 5 years, you can go to market. Um, so it's a little bit different than other markets that are faster. Um, in digital health, we have a few companies in our portfolio that are, software companies that are corporate software, but, by chance in healthcare, so they can be faster into the market. And the challenge today for the startups that develop the deep tech side of things that most investors will not wait. And they don't have the patience to wait for you to start generate revenue, and you need to show that you have a running business today that create revenues. Uh, for a lot of these startups, it's really hard to gap these years.
Hmm. And so what are, so if you had to look at the pain points that your portfolio or the companies that you're looking at are tackling, it sounds like you're tackling more deep tech use cases and the pain points that require longer cycles of development and prototyping. But what are some of those key pains in the health industry that you're really curious about?
So a lot of it is about taking healthcare to the homes. So doing diagnostics at home rather than go to the clinic. For instance, a simple device that will measure if the baby has an ear infection. And if you're a parent, you know that babies tend to get ear infections, but they can't speak. They can tell you to just cry endlessly. And there is no way to solve this unless you go to the physician who, with the otoscope, can look into the ear and see. And that is not accurate. Imagine you have a device that gives you a full validated answer at home. So then all you need to do is to get the right medication. Uh, and we have a few examples of this type of devices. We have, a home blood test machine. We have a few devices that can do prediction of um, migraines, prediction of COPD, to rise ups and so forth. And it's all about taking healthcare from the clinics, from the expensive areas to the home to make it more accessible.
And so, if you're looking at what's happening today in the world of predictive or generative AI in the context of deep tech, medical devices, whether it's at home diagnostics or other elements, what's the bridge? Because a lot of times I think we're looking at what's happening in the predictive or generative AI, and we're looking at very much software based productivity LLMs. I know that there's a lot of really fascinating work in the context of mental health and telehealth. Where are the big elements that you see now are shifting or catalyzing as a result of what's happening?
So healthcare is moving slowly, right? And if you develop something with AI, which all of them do today, right? It's a very common tool, and people are using AI. It's a very general and wide title AI. All of them use some types of AI. Not very much use generative AI, but they use mostly deep learning or machine learning in order to develop the algorithms that will get to the results. So at first, in most cases, the first application will be decision support, something that will help the physician get to the decision faster or in more reliable way. The next phase will be, okay, you don't need an expert physician if up till now you had to go to the expert in order to, solve the situation. Now with the software, you can go to the GP, or even to a technician, not even a physician in some cases. In the long run, it will eventually take away complete tasks from the physician, but it takes time. The evolution is of years. It will not, 2 years and then, get rid of the doctor. No, it takes years because we need to be very careful. You're talking about lives of people. There is no room for any mistake. And people tend to forget a human physician has the right to make mistakes. An algorithm has zero tolerance for mistake. You need to be always right.
Let's talk a bit about the mentality of the entrepreneur in your space. One of the elements that, when you ask many VCs in software and B2B enterprise and consumer, you hear them saying, some characteristics of the entrepreneur they're looking for are impatience, stubbornness, move fast, break things. There's this persona of what it means to be in sort of this software race today. It sounds like from in your world, the entrepreneurial nature, the behavior, it may have different elements to it because we're talking about longer cycles and we're talking about different elements. How do you see sort of this persona of the entrepreneurs in your space? What are the characteristics that make up for a successful entrepreneur that can go the whole end to end journey in what sounds to be a very complicated flow?
Mm-hmm. The flow is complicated, and you need to be well aware of the stages that you need to go through. And if you take, a software guy and put him in front on top of a, medical device company, he'll probably fail because he'll move too fast. He'll go to the market without the product being ready or being validated in the proper way. So it can kill a company if you go too fast. And we've seen the examples. So you need to have the balance. You need to have, on the one hand, the impatience, the energy, someone who will always run as fast as possible, but needs to know, there are things you cannot overcome. FDA is FDA. You don't play with it. You have to do it right. Same for the CE, right? It's the same in Europe. But be creative. In some cases, perhaps you have a use case where you can, go on a wellness route. So you don't need a full FDA clearance because you don't claim to do anything. It's just a wellness device. And, use it for your own wellness if you like. You can enjoy it. You don't promise anything, then you can do it. But you need to be very careful how you do it, not to block yourself from going into the medical device field eventually. So you need to be very much aware of all the obstacles.
Interesting. If you have to think back to some some anecdotes or instances in which you were surprised at this work, particularly in the transition to investing or from software to health, what were some elements that you had to sort of do a mind shift or rearrange your train of thought, or retrain yourself to rethink in this industry?
One interesting I remember that a thought that came through to me one day. We started to deal with digital therapeutics. Okay. And digital therapeutics sounds very complicated. If you're going to use a software in order to cure an illness, it has to be, super smart, super accurate. And you imagine that the barrier is going to be much higher than doing diagnostics.
Yeah.
In essence, it's the other way around. If you think about it, when you diagnose, You need to be able to diagnose all cases all the time in the right way. There is no room for any mistake. Now, if you have a digital therapeutics for lower back pain, and you can only help 30% of the population, it's a big win. It's a big win.
It's huge.
Yeah. So digital therapeutics is actually easier than diagnostics. And for me, it was counterintuitive.
Tell me more about this. It's interesting.
So we have this one company that was developed by this PhD that is doing physical therapy for back pains. And he was doing that in his own office for many, many years. And eventually he came and said, okay, we can make this automated. Because he came to the conclusion that many of the back pains are created because you don't stand in a very symmetric way. So he developed a device that you wear on your body and have some sensors, and you walk on a treadmill, and it will measure the symmetry of your body. See if you're walking in a symmetric way, or perhaps you're leaning to one end or another end. So that's the part that will say, okay, this is the problem. And then it will try and fix it by putting pressure on your body in the right place and let you walk, and the pressure will fix your position. And in a series of short trainings, it will cure your pain. Now, it will not cure the pain of everyone with lower back pain, but everyone who suffers from lower back pain has no way of solving it other than painkillers. So they will be willing to try it. And if it will help for 30% of the population, we have a big winner in our hand.
Yeah, it's huge.
So this is now in clinical trials, and after the clinical trials, we will get the regulation approval, and then we can go and try and start selling it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's going to be much faster than a diagnostic device that will do a blood test at home or other devices that we have.
You said a sentence before that I want to look back to, that human physicians can make errors, algorithms cannot, in terms of at least expectation, right? It's a matter of and I'm thinking in parallel to self-driving cars and how we see and it's always been fascinating to me, sort of this decision making process of being making the decision to make that transition with enough evidence that you're aiding. So why is that? Why do we have that there? Do you agree with that, by the way? Do you agree that this should be the state of mind? Do you think it should be different?
No, I think it has to be this state of mind because physicians are human beings, and human beings can make mistakes. A physician, if you take them to court, they will have to prove that they reviewed all the data and that they followed, the golden lines of how this practice is being done. And if they did it and got to the wrong decision, that's okay. They're human. They're allowed to make this mistake because they were following the guidelines that were made by, I don't know, the association of this expert or not. Otherwise, they will not be able to make any decision because there are always mistakes. Okay. If you train an algorithm on a certain input and this algorithm is right only in some cases, how can you trust it? How can you use it? It has to be accurate all the time. If I want to diagnose, I don't know, this ear infection and I'm wrong and you gave a baby antibiotics for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
and this problem, I don't know, God forbid, got worse, and the kid was very ill and hospitalized, and let's stop here. It's a big deal. It's a huge problem.
Unless perhaps you're able to explain the train of thought and the evidence and the data which was used to in line similarly to how perhaps a physician would make a decision. So it sounds to me like there is an element of expressing what was the ethical and coherent decision making process, that as long as you follow the guidelines it's okay to be wrong. How do we implement that same explainability and similar framework to an algorithm, right?
You're right. And then remember that in some cases, It's the difference between art and science, still.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay? An expert physician is a craftsman. Okay? He knows by heart. He can look at the ear and get to the solution, to the decision immediately, and there is no recording of the ear. So
Yep.
nobody can question that. An algorithm, you'll have to prove that the algorithm was right. And if it's based on AI, the algorithm is a black box. You don't even know.
Yep. Um, and I hope for us that we're able to open up that black box, because just like we've seen in in LLMs and predictive AI, we're saying that there's massive efforts to unbox this black box to be able to tell, okay, this is where we got our data from, this is how we came to the conclusions. Talor, we can go on this for hours, but I really want to appreciate your time, and thank you for spending this time with me. I think that the space that you're in is incredibly fascinating. It's effectively one of the most important things we're doing, obviously, for humanity. The pains that you're looking at and the opportunities, I think they're not just nice to haves. They're really fundamentally changing how people experience their life. And so it sounds amazing. And we didn't even get to talk about the amazing work that you've also done with Geshem,
Hmm.
and the work you've
But
done since
I
then.
want to make one comment, if you have 30 seconds. People always ask me, how will AI affect the job of the physicians? And will they lose their job or not?
Yeah.
And people don't realize the amazing shortage of healthcare providers or healthcare experts we have all around the world. There are not enough physicians to take care of all the population, the new babies, and especially the older guys. We are all getting old, and there are not enough physicians to take care of everyone. We can only hope that AI and technology will make the physician more efficient so we can treat the entire population with the same manpower that we have today. And I'm not sure it will be. It could be that today we are at the peak of the quality of healthcare years to come.
It's quite a thought to leave with. Uh, quite a thought. Hello, thank you so much.
Thank you.